The Entrepreneur's Library, episode 103.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Library, the only book-centric podcast that reviews all the top-selling business books and shares authors' perspective firsthand. This is your resource to finding the next great book that will enable you to grow personally and professionally. Welcome your host, Wade Danielson.
Thank you for joining us on the EL. If you haven't heard already, we made some changes at episode 100 that allow you to basically become a VIP at the elpodcast.com, which actually puts you in our, not daily, but Monday through Friday in a drawing to actually win the book that we discuss that particular day. So in this case, today we have Richard Hall, author of How to Solve Problems and Make Brilliant Decisions, Business Thinking Skills That Really Work. Welcome, Richard, and thank you for joining us on the Entrepreneur's Library.
I'm glad to be here.
Will you take just a moment before we dive into your book, but take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about you personally?
Okay. I've been around in business for really quite a long time. My background's in marketing and advertising and consulting. I've worked with lots of major companies, multinationals, and I've had a fantastic time and am very enthusiastic about the prospects of the changing world, unlike quite a lot of my contemporaries who seem rather depressed by it. So that's a bit about me. I think the thing that really strikes me as I get older is I get more and more curious about what's going on and the things that are changing, and that makes life doubly enriching, I think.
Absolutely. Well, Richard, thank you for sharing that. Now let's jump right into your book, How to Solve Problems and Make Brilliant Decisions, which was just made available for purchase not too long ago, November 11th, 2014. And Richard, we're going to move quickly, but we're going to cover the top questions that our listener/reader wants to get answered. The first question they have for you is, what was the inspiration behind writing How to Solve Problems and Make Brilliant Decisions?
I've written a number of books before on presenting, career development, marketing, and stuff like that, and they're all very specific in their topics. And I became increasingly concerned in a sense, but also aware of the fact that we've stopped thinking in the way that we used to. And there are a number of reasons for that. Life has become very action-packed, where our minds are increasingly stimulated, probably overstimulated, but undernourished. And we're not thinking in the same sort of way that we did. We sit in front of screens the whole time, working incredibly hard, but not thinking with that purity of calm and quiet that happened, if you like, 200 years ago or even 20 years ago. And that seemed to me to be an issue worth looking at. The second thing is that it became increasingly clear to me that we don't know very much about the mind at all. I mean, it's quite extraordinary that the human mind, which is an extraordinary thing, 112 billion neurons firing away, only weighs 1.5 kilos, and yet we don't know that much about it. So that's sort of where it started. It seemed to me that if you're going to succeed in business today, you need to be thinking about thinking right up at the top of all the things that you do.
So our busy/productive entrepreneur who's listening right now, they have a ton of books, that they can look at. There's 1.5 million. We keep talking about that came out last year alone. So this next question really is asking you, what makes your book different from others regarding a similar or the same topic?
I think it's a number of things. I had some quite nice reviews, but I mean, the words that pleased me most about them were, this book is very accessible, it's very practical, it's very energetic, and it's very optimistic. And what it does is it acts as a primer. So if you buy this book, read this book, it saves you a whole load of time reading a lot of other books. I read about 30 or 40 books before on similar sorts of subjects before I wrote this book. I thought they were great. I thought they were full of terrific stuff, but my goodness me, they were academic in their language, some of them, and they were very, very long, much longer than this book. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to pay. I've bowed down before their great knowledge, but I've summarized and used some of their ideas and made an accessible primer for anybody who wants to think about thinking. And I think I think it works like that. And the people who've been nice about it have said just that thing. And there's a guy called Marcus Alexander, he's a professor at the London Business School, who said, I'd recommend this book passionately to the many managers in a hurry who waste so much time trying to avoid thinking for themselves. So hopefully that happens.
So, Richard, I wanted to ask you, the next question is really, how do you suggest the reader engage with your book? Is this one that they should, start from the beginning and read all the way through, or can they definitely jump in and jump out grabbing information as needed?
It's set out in such a way that they can go in and out of it. They can read it back to front. There's a summary at the beginning which says, if you don't read anything more than these 12 pages give you the basic rudiments. I mean, it's a basic thinking toolkit. So I've acknowledged the realities of being an entrepreneur and having the limited amount of time that they have. So it does actually, it's very user and reader friendly. The publishers are very good at that. They've been very helpful.
Great. So, Richard, my favorite part of the entire interview, and that's where I want to really just hand over the mic to you for the next 5 to 8 minutes and allow you to take the reader through what they can get out of your book. Will you do that for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
What I said at the outset is we know little about the brain, but what we do know, thanks to a truly brilliant man called Daniel Kahneman, who wrote a best-selling book called Thinking Fast and Slow, and he won a Nobel Prize. He's the daddy of them all in terms of psychology, is that there are two parts of our brain. There's intuition and there's rationality. Most of us think we're terribly rational people. We are convinced that we have forensic minds and we look at the facts and then we come to conclusions. The reality is that our intuition, our instincts, are incredibly powerful and are making a huge contribution, much huger than we ever anticipate in the way we think. So what I've tried to do is, through the book, to look at the various things that in business we need to have, which is we need to be able to problem solve, we need to be able to make decisions, we need to be able to think creatively, and we need to have empathy. We need to be able to think in the way that other people think, understand how other people are thinking. So I've covered those 4 areas. And I start the book with a reflection on what I think the 4 most potent words are in English language, is which are what do you think? We use those in a different way, from what do you think to what do you think? And it means different things. But basically, going right back to the beginning, that's what we should all be asking ourselves. What do you think? And it's not easy to do, because most of us think too fast or too simply or too dramatically. We like to there's a predisposition on the part of human beings to over-dramatize, and we need to calm down. And what the book constantly advises is slow down, calm down, walk, talk to other people, and don't get so stressed, because the more stressed you are, the less effective you'll be as a thinker. One of the things, and this is perhaps old-fashioned now, because Gordon Gekko said lunch is for wimps. When I was in advertising, lunch was certainly for people in advertising, and we enjoyed it greatly. But it's a serious point. We don't spend enough time sitting and eating and talking to each other, because if we did that, we'd think a lot better. And it's ironic, is it not, that some of the best thinking that seems to be done is either when we're in bed or when we're in a restaurant. That's when we very often get great ideas. The book, at the beginning, I talk about how to think better, which there are 2 bêtes noires I have. One of them is do not try and multitask. The brain is not designed to multitask, and you need to concentrate on one thing at a time. That will make a huge difference to the way that you think. And the second thing is loosen up, take time, and be in a good mood. Because if you aren't, you're going to be struggling. Very quickly, on problem solving, this is the sort of thing where, in those immortal words, Houston, we have a problem. You have to solve a problem. The key things there are that the brain, we know from all the research that's been done, is lazy, and we worry more about what other people think. We're overconfident when we know quite a lot, and we like patterns and things like that. So what I'm advising people to do is to just sit down, look out of the window, ask some questions, and just sit quietly and work things out. And it's amazing that when you stop, when you're not looking at a screen, when you're not rushing around from A to B, that suddenly your mind starts working in a way that you wouldn't believe. There's a guy called Lord Rutherford, who was the father of nuclear physics, who said, "We have no money, so we shall have to think." And I think he was right. The most important thing, if you're going to be a good problem solver, is ask questions, listen to what other people say, stick to the issues, and then ask more questions. There's a guy called Anthony Bourdain. You probably, your listeners will know him well, I'm sure. He's the executive chef at Les Halles, the restaurants, and he written a brilliant cookbook, which is also the best book on management I've ever read. And he talks about the need for deep preparation of ingredients. The second part of the book is about decision making, and it's difficult, actually, making decisions. I used to think it was very easy. It isn't. It is rocket science. It's very, very complicated because there's lots of stuff going on. We've got globalization, developments of technology, we've got digital media, with lots of stuff happening, which makes life very difficult. And good decision-making is really well-judged risk-taking, because some you win and some you lose. But in the end, good decision-making is based on experience. It's based on breaking problems down into small pieces, and giving yourself the most amount of time to make those decisions. We tend to be very timid in the way we make decisions, and we try and avoid doing them. There's a Yiddish proverb which I love, which is "Prepare for the worst, the best can take care of itself." So I think that's probably as good as it gets. Creativity. This is going at a hell of a gallop, isn't it? I'm sorry. Creativity. Maurice Saatchi of Saatchi & Saatchi, the advertising agency, said creativity is the last legal way to gain an unfair advantage, which I think is brilliant, because in the end, the biggest battle we've got in today's world is gaining people's attention. So how do we do it? What is creativity? I think it's very simple. Having spent a lot of my life in advertising, there's a guy in advertising who said there's nothing new under the sun, but there's always a better way. It's called Ed McCabe. He was American. He was brilliant. But the logic of creativity is searching for alternatives and the ability to make connections. I don't think it's more complicated than that. It's not wacky. It's not mad. It's not inexplicable. It's about a form of thinking which enables people to look at what's in front of them and say, is there another way of doing this? Very often it lies in the product itself. When I was in advertising, we advertised a glue called Araldite, and it was a very, very strong glue, the strongest glue there could be. It was epoxy resin. So to prove it was as strong as it was, we stuck a car to a poster site in the middle of London, which was a very good way of demonstrating that it was a strong glue. And the headline said it also sticks handles to teapots. The enemies of creativity are fear and cynicism. So we need to be aware of those. The most important thing about creativity is you need to be a bit of a rebel, and you need to do what Robert Kennedy said. He said, there are those who look at things the way they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not. I think one of the joys of good creative thinking is you need to have a sense of humor, because if you make people laugh, they are more surprised and they behave accordingly. You need to have soft eyes. You need to notice stuff. You need to walk around. You need to, if you're an entrepreneur, you need to walk around where it is you're selling your products. You need to be on the move. You need to notice things, because that's the stuff which leads to greater creative thinking. In the book, I cover a whole load of ways of improving creativity. I'm not going to deal with those now. They speak for themselves. I mean, it will become very boring. I want to finish this bit talking about empathy. Elvis Presley said we can't go on together with suspicious minds. That was terrific stuff. But in the end, however good our decisions, however good our creative thinking, however good our problem solving, if we don't engage other people, if we don't understand how to get them to do the things that we want them to do, it won't work. And increasingly, I've come to the conclusion that the only thing that makes the difference between success and failure is working with other people and getting other people to be on board with what you want them to be on board with. Increasingly, we're living in a world which is group-driven, not solo-driven. And it really matters that people hear what you want them to hear. What matters is not what you said or what you think you said, but what they think you said. And unless we crack the understanding of how to get other people to think, which I deal with at some length, then we're not going to be successful. Jack Welch is something of a hero of mine. He's the one-time leader of GE, and he's been out of the business for some time. But he did say something which I thought was terrific. He said, giving people self-confidence is by far the most important thing I can do, because then they will act. And he said that the keys, and I think he understood people better than most, to success was speed, simplicity, and self-confidence. The book, in the end, the key thing about the book, what I'm trying to get people to do is to make the most of that amazing engine they've got in their heads, which makes a computer look like a cheese grater in terms of sophistication. We have an amazing asset. So making the most of that and thinking more carefully, creatively, and constructively. In the end, it's only a book. And it's hopefully what it does is to facilitate people to, by dipping in and out of it, to think better, and also to enjoy the thought of thinking. It doesn't take itself too incredibly seriously, because I think there's enough seriousness around to last a lifetime, and I think we need to lighten the tone somewhat.
So, Richard, thank you for taking us through with that summary. And I think you alluded to this next question there at the end, but I want to ask it anyway, just in case the listener missed it. But if the reader could only take away one concept, principle, or action item out of everything that you just talked to us about, out of your entire book, what would you want that to be?
I think it would be. I'm going to cheat a bit. I mean, I'm going to say it's one thing, and it's actually three, but it's in one sentence, I guess. But it's going to be around looking around yourself, looking and seeing what's going on, listening to people, and the other thing is learning to change your mind. There's a funny thing about the human mind. Once we've come to a conclusion, which can very often be very impulsive, it's very difficult to get us to change our minds, and that's one of the big dangers of in politics, apart from anything else, and certainly in business, when we think we've got it cracked, and we may not have done. So the ability to change your mind is very important. Basically, I'd like everybody to start thinking about thinking. It sounds a peculiar thing to say, but thinking about thinking is a big step forward if we start to do that.
Well, perfect. Thank you for sharing that. And Richard, now I want to give you an opportunity to maybe hopefully brag on yourself. And that's, do you have a favorite quote from your book, something that you wrote that you really liked?
I'll give you a quote from Mike Tyson, which I absolutely adore. I hadn't thought in all my judgment that Mike Tyson was an intellectual, but try this. He said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Mm. What I love about that is, however well you think, however well you think you've got your business sorted out, things happen, stuff happens. So I like that, but the one which does it for me even more than that probably is Steve Peters, who's a psychologist, sports psychologist, who worked with some of the British Olympiads. But he's worked with lots of other people around the world. And he said, there are only three things you need to know in life. One is that life's unfair. Two is that they keep moving the goalposts. And three is you can only try your best. I think within that, there's a big thought, which is that thinking is really, really important, but you have to be a philosopher as well, and you have to be phlegmatic about the things that can happen to you.
So, Richard, our last question is book oriented, and I'm asking you to recommend a book that's a paradigm shifting, life impacting book. Do you have one that you can suggest to our readers?
Yes, I have two actually, but they're slightly surprising. One of them is a book that was written a long time ago and lives still for me, and it's called Enthusiasms, and it's by Bernard Levin. What I'd say to readers is whenever you read a book, if it doesn't have a strong sense of enthusiasm within it and an energy about it, then it isn't doing your brain as much good as it should do. The second is it's a work of fiction, which I think is absolutely stunning, and it's relatively recent, and it's by Tom Wolfe, and it's called Back to Blood. And it's about, Tom Wolfe is the guy who wrote Bonfire of the Vanities. And it is absolutely extraordinary, and the energy it contains is inspiring. And I think we need to think about thinking, but we need to do so with enthusiasm and energy. And it isn't, thinking alone won't get you there, but if you've got enthusiasm and energy, it can work for you. Back to Blood, I just think is so extraordinary. What a tour de force. What a star he is.
Thank you for sharing those. We haven't had those recommended just yet. And Richard, before we depart, can you recommend the best way for our listeners to get more information on you and your book, How to Solve Problems and Make Brilliant Decisions?
Okay, I have a website which is www.colorfulthinkers.com. That's COLOURFUL thinkers. So there you go. So I've got a website which is set around the book and the whole thing about thinking.
Perfect, Richard. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your book with us today.
Thank you very much, and I think you're doing great work, and all power to you. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that interview today with Richard. If you would like more information on him or his book, How to Solve Problems and Make Brilliant Decisions, check out the elpodcast.com. Thanks for listening in.
Looking for your next book idea? Head over to the elpodcast.com, where Wade shares his amazing resource, the top 10 business books recommended by over 500 entrepreneurs, with you for free. That's the elpodcast.com. Till the next time, keep it on the EL.